lonesomeness waits and dreams in the deep, and decay spreads over the tottering cities of men.
Have you ever heard of Changcheng High School's beautiful and picturesque lake? Oh yeah, it is indeed famous, but underneath it was a tunnel which led to a room, and during the Japanese occupation, it was the torture room. And until today, though the tunnel was destroyed, you may still see the big hole in the lake at night, when the water is clear, when the fountains are closed. I saw it during my NPCC camp in school. It was a terrifying view. I seemed to hear faint groans and eerie laughter in the still night from the clear lake. And I saw this big, dark hole in the lake. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but when I asked my friend to look at the lake, he also saw it. But he could not hear the faint noise coming out of it. I asked him where the big hole led to, and he said it led to the old Audi's basement, and that basement was locked and had chains and locks on the door. When we went back to our rooms, our classrooms, we saw an old attendant, and we normally call him Uncle Lee. He was currently the oldest attendant serving for the school, and we had heard lots of stories from him. We related to him of our experience, and he said, "I sometimes also see the hole, and I went to the old Audi's basement to take a look, and I heard the groans more clearly." We were in awe by his courage, and asked him if he had ever seen ghosts before. He said, "A few years ago, when students like you all camp in school, I had to look after you all, and that time I was not so brave, but I tried to explore with them the old Audi. Then," he said with a laugh, "it was terrible." And the smile from his face faded. After that, he went back to his room and told us not to think too much and go to sleep. A few years ago in the northern parts of Sweden, I was going out for a nice evening of fishing. I am what I guess is called a fishing supervisor. I check that the other fishermen have their licenses at certain areas of lakes and streams. This is in the late summer, and I've been doing my round, which I usually end with going to a small lake and fly fish for some trout. This lake or pond is pretty deep in the forest, and I rarely meet anyone there. Actually, I've never met anyone there. The lake looks kind of like a crater, a perfect round circle that is perhaps 100 meters in diameter. It contains a natural population of perch and trout. It is a warm summer evening with a slight breeze. The birds are chirping and the fish are rising to all the insects spawning on the surface. I rig my gear and aim for one of the fish rising to the right of me. The same second as my fly lands on the surface, it is like someone pauses time. The sun hides behind a cloud. The wind stops blowing. The birds are suddenly silent and the fish stop eating. A smell rises from the ground I'm standing on. It smells like something dead, something rotten. Like I have a carcass buried under my feet. All of a sudden, I am aware that there is something walking out of the forest behind me, maybe 10 to 15 meters back. It is like I can see it in the corner of my eye, but I still really can't see it. Every hair on my body is on end, and it is suddenly very cold around me. The thing watching me just stands there, and I don't have the courage to turn around at all. I see my fly sink to the bottom, but I can't move. I can't do anything about it because I don't dare to move. Then the wind hits me, and it carries the awful smell away. The sun comes out again. A bird is singing somewhere in the forest, and the almost overtaking feeling of being watched lets go of me, I turn around and there is nothing there. On the lake, the fish start rising again. I pack my gear and throw the backpack on my back and run for it. Through the forest, to my car. I hit the gas and drive like a maniac until I find a big road and civilization again. I park at the side of the road, and I say to myself, what the hell was that? My heart is still racing. I haven't been to this lake since this happened, and I don't know anyone else who has either. What do you guys think it was? I've probably visited this place 20 times before this happened, and never felt anything like it. The only thing is that I'm always afraid of bears when visiting it. I do fish at a lot of ponds and lakes that are pretty deep in the forest. There's always a lot of wildlife in these places. Deers, moose, fox, and the occasional wolf, bobcat and bear. I'm never afraid of meeting one except when I've been at this particular lake. This happened when I was in Hyderabad. Some of my friends thought of having a party in an open space, so we're thinking of going to this place called Osman Sagar. It's nearby to Gandapet. I said okay because the place is a huge lake, and I have visited that place like 2 years back. So we all started the journey from our place, and we're driving to the lake. We started at around 10:30, and we kept the drinks in a cooler box. There was a lot of drizzling while we were going, but as soon as we reached there, the sky completely cleared up, and there was a dazzling view of a million stars, like they were looking upon us. We stopped on the bridge of Osman Sagar, but there were grills placed which were not there before when I visited 2 years back. Also, there were police patrolling. So we thought it's better we go to the backside. So we went to the backside, which was full of bushes and trees. We were sitting on the car, only opened our car doors there, just chilling out, smoking. It was almost midnight, so I thought we will start the drinks. But just then, we heard a huge splash. We all stopped in our tracks, and we were like, what the hell? Because we were on the other side of the lake, and there was nothing that tall to make a huge splash sound like that. Then we all got down from our car and walked towards the shore of the lake, and were looking towards the bridge. There was this figure, glowing in white. The bridge was at least 550 meters away, but we were clearly able to see the spirit for some reason. The figure just passed through the grills and jumped into the water with a huge cry, which sounded like a lady, and we all could hear it. It fell into the water with a huge splash. My friends were all freaked out and started running towards the car, but I was walking towards the water. I was in a trance. One of my friends held my hand and started dragging me towards the car, and I was still trying to go towards the lake. Another friend snapped me and I snapped out of it. We all got into the car, and the driver started reversing it. I looked at the bridge. The white figure was standing again on the bridge and jumped again with a cry, and again there was a splash. We drove away and got on the outer ring road, and then we started having drinks and talking about it. My friend asked me what happened, and I said I heard something was calling out for help. My friends never took me back there again. I understand it was a residual haunting, which is like residual entities that do not have a sense of what's happening around them, but they just keep happening again and again. Later, when I surfed the net, I came to know that this lake has been a suicide spot for many. However, what I don't understand is how it was able to call out to me, and more importantly, how I was the only one who could hear the calling out. It is still a mystery to me. This happened to me a few years ago, and it wasn't until today that I realized I may have been in some sort of danger. My husband and I were camping with two friends in a pretty remote area, deep in the mountains on the shore of a small lake. Our first morning there, I decided to paddleboard to the other side of the lake. One thing about me, I have submechanophobia, which is a fear of submerged objects in water. It doesn't affect me too badly. I love the water. But I get the heebie-jeebies when I see sunken boats, large fallen trees, massive boulders in the water, stuff like that. It's worse when I'm alone. I do pretty okay when other people are with me, and it has to be a large clear body of water. Swimming pools, rivers, or lakes where the water isn't super clear don't bother me. So I go off by myself on my board. The lake is on one big oval, so you can basically see everything from the shoreline. However, where we had set up camp, you couldn't see the whole lake, so I quickly lost sight of my husband. I started to freak out a little bit because I had immediately seen a big sunken tree. This is a high Sierra lake, so the water is crystal clear, but quickly turns black because of how deep it is. I told myself I was being silly and needed to get over my dumb phobia. I didn't really see anything else, but I decided to stay close to the shore because usually that makes me feel better. But this lake doesn't really have a typical shore. It's all granite rock that just quickly and steeply drops into the water. I still don't really see much in the water, but I'm really starting to panic, which is weird. I have this overwhelming feeling to get back as fast as I can, but I think I'm just being dumb. I try to deep breathe because I really want to get to the other side where there is a waterfall. So I trudge on, trying to calm myself and enjoy nature, yet still feeling like I should go back. As I'm paddling, I start to realize how alone I am. I keep looking around, hoping to see a hiker, but I'm completely by myself. I try not to think about that because I'm almost to the waterfall and the view is gorgeous. As I get closer, I see there is an island, for lack of a better word. Just a large amount of granite that is fairly close to the shore. There is a single plastic chair sitting on the island, which is funny but slightly unsettling because it's such a weird thing to see so deep in nature. I'm still freaked out, so I figured if I got off my board and onto the island, I would feel better because I would be on land and my phobia wouldn't bother me. I pull up my board and start walking around, trying to enjoy the view, and I just can't. I feel terrified. The waterfall is so much louder now that I'm near it, and I realize if I were to scream, no one would hear me. My husband is the only person around for miles, and he can't see or hear me, and I'm terrified. I keep looking around because I feel like I'm being watched. I decide I can't take this, even if it's just my stupid irrational fear. I have to get back as fast as I can. I get on my board and paddle down the center of the lake rather than keep to the shore, because it's quicker that way. It takes everything in me to do it. I still can't shake the feeling I'm being watched, and I feel so damn vulnerable in the center of this deep, black lake. I'm shaking the whole way back, but as I'm getting closer to camp, relief sweeps through me. I get off the board and go see my husband. He happily asks me how it was, and I can't talk. He asks me if I'm okay, and I just start crying. I tell him I think my stupid phobia made me panic, even though I didn't really see anything in the water. I feel totally insane, and I'm just happy our friends aren't back from their hike to see me behaving so irrationally. We left later that day. Since then, I've become more open to the unknown. I was thinking about it, and it suddenly hit me that maybe something was going on, and it wasn't just my phobia, especially because I never even really saw anything that triggers it. I'm not sure if I just freaked out because I was alone, the phobia, or something else. I guess I'll never know, but curious if others have been in a similar situation or have any insight. After reading a few posts on here, I've decided to add one of the creepier, still unexplained events that happened to me and a group of friends within the past 5 years. Thinking back on it, I still get this unnerved, bad feeling that sort of lingers. Anyway, here it goes. A group of friends and myself rented a place on a lake for just a fun-filled drunken weekend. We were all in our young to mid-20s, and it was supposed to be just a big party. For the most part, that's what it was. The Friday night and Saturday morning, we pretty much went all out, having a blast on the water, and just doing fun, stupid stuff. Well, naturally, when Saturday afternoon rolled around, we were all so dead from going all out, we decided it would be a night of no drinking, but maybe a little weed smoking by some of us, and just kind of having a chill evening and night. That's what it was, relaxed. So 9 p.m. comes rolling around and about 8 of us were inside the house and 5 outside. The house was a 2-story with a 2nd-story deck and back porch, and it was surrounded by the woods, and then down through the woods, you would then hit the lake. I'll mention that we already had experienced some weird vibes from the locals when we first arrived in town, mostly just backcountry old-timers that I assumed were leering and irritated because we were a bunch of college-aged kids looking to have a good time. But the town and the lake were large, so it's not like anyone knew where we were staying. Anyways, 3 of my friends were on the upstairs back porch, and my other friend and I were downstairs, outside, just talking on this little old table near the woods. I mean, it was otherwise just a really nice night. My friend and I were just getting lost in conversation, and all of a sudden, there was this weird feeling that encompassed us. Like an unnerving, physical experience that came from the woods behind us. It was so strong, we both kind of quietened down. And then, out of nowhere, this loud chanting abruptly came from the woods. I have no idea how far away it was because of the way the lake is set up. I'm pretty sure the voices carried up through the forest. It sounded like a cult, chanting away, and all the voices were male. I mean, they were loud and perfectly in sync. I think we were frozen for all of about 20 seconds before I couldn't contain myself and darted towards the house, with her following me. I don't know how to explain the feeling that came with that chanting, but it was almost evil. Like, just something so powerfully uninviting. I was shaking by the time we got up to the 2nd story and ran out on the balcony with the other 3 friends. One of them was my brother. By the time we got up there, the chanting was gone, and I naturally asked, "Did you guys hear that?" in the most shaky, freaked out voice. They all had heard it, and not seconds later the chanting began again. So the 5 of us are out there peering into the forest, listening to this chanting that would sometimes sound far away and then sound relatively close. All male voices in the weirdest language, or I don't even know what it was. Sounded like a strange extreme church. Then, following the chanting, a loud bang like someone hit a huge metal object sounded. And then the worst part came. A man wailing. Like in extreme pain wailing. All of my hair was up. It was the freakiest experience ever. My brother and I were staring at each other in a mixture of scared excitement and horror. The wailing stopped, and then it was back to the chanting, which eventually died out. I was so freaked out by it, I wanted to call the cops because whoever screamed had been in a lot of pain. That, mixed with the weird chanting, just made me immediately think of some terrible sacrifice going on. One friend tried to say it had to be some drunk guys just messing around, singing, and being weird, but no way that was coming from some drunk guys. They were perfectly in sync, then the bang, and then the wail of pain, and then all that weird tension and energy was gone. Nope, I didn't call the cops, and I wish I would have. But honestly, the forest was so large, and since the lake house was up, looking down at the woods and lake, it could have been anywhere. It definitely wasn't in our close proximity, but it was close enough to hear all of that perfectly. We went in and got some of the others, but by the time they came out, the chanting had stopped. Someone wanted to go explore and find where it had been coming from, but obviously that was a stupid idea. After that, I was so ready to go home. I can't explain the relief of driving away from there the next morning. Even now, it gives me the worst feeling. Whatever it was, it felt so wrong and evil. I'll never forget that moment. I can only imagine it was some weird cult stuff. This is a true story that contains an old wives' tale from my gran, so it is exactly what it sounds like, and the truth of its accuracy is subjective to what the reader believes. The parts about my mum, Elle, and I are 100% true. We were about 8 or 9 the day Mum took Elle and I over the heath. It was a hot and bright day in the middle of the summer holidays. We had been collecting natural materials to make a collage when we got home, and Mum's rucksack was full of stray feathers, wild grasses, leaves and twigs, and we were on our way home where Gran was making a cheese flan and salad for dinner. As we were all very hot and slightly tired, Mum had decided that we would wade through the river instead of going back over the hills the way we had come. The thought of pushing my tiny wheelchair through the muddy-bottomed, weed-tangled river never seemed to faze my mum. She was a healthy, fit 26-year-old and knew the heath like the back of her hand. The river wasn't very deep at that part, so Mum tipped my wheelchair back, told Elle to hold onto the handle, and we went in. The water immediately soaked our clothes through, and Elle and I started to scream, giggle, and splash each other in sheer delight. Then we saw them, weeds, flowing with the current of the river, swaying back and forth like a woman's long, tangled, unkempt hair. And I got the distinct impression that what we saw could have been either thing. I glanced at Elle and instantly knew that she was having the same uncanny notion. The weeds started to curl around our legs and the wheels of my wheelchair, making our progress a little more laborious, and our previous screams of playful fun changed to moans and squeals of unease and disgust as we felt the weeds gently tugging at our legs. At no point did Mum ever look anxious or fazed by this experience. She just kept saying, "It's only water weeds, you two. Come on, don't be silly. You've seen them loads of times." We finally reached the other side of the river, and as Mum dragged my wheelchair backwards up the riverbank, Elle climbed up it and sat down beside me. We both just stared silently at the river and the sea of green for what felt like the longest time, but in actual fact was only 10 minutes, before walking the rest of the way home. That night, after a hot bubble bath and cheese flan salad, in our flannel pajamas and slipper socks around the fire drinking hot tea, we told Gran about our adventure. Our Gran took a sip of tea from her mug and told us the story of Green Hair. She had been a real person, though her real name had been forgotten by Gran. Conveniently, Elle and I thought. Anyway, she had lived in the village around 1912 before the area was built up and modernized and developed into what it has become. She was young and kind, with a pretty face and beautiful long blonde hair, a daughter of a gentleman farmer, and was deeply in love with a handsome young soldier. They were to get married, but before they could, the Great War broke out, and her young man was called up to fight. He was killed by a hand grenade on the front line, and when she found out she was widowed before she'd even become a wife, she lost the will to live, and, driven by grief-stricken insanity, she went to the same river that we waded through, and she threw herself in. The river was as wild as the land at the time, and by the time her body was discovered, it was blue, bloated and half-eaten by fish. Her long, corn-colored hair had become interwoven with the slimy algae and long strands of evil-smelling riverweeds, which clogged and choked the bed of the river. In fact, the pathologist who performed the post-mortem said that the body may have been found sooner if not for the dark green weeds that appeared to have curled around her limbs and torso, anchoring her corpse to the riverbed for days. From that time onwards, it was said that the river was haunted, cursed, or both. Anyway, an extremely bad place. People claimed to see the spirit of the young woman kneeling beside the river and weeping bitterly. More commonly, people often saw the body of the girl floating on top of the water, with her long green hair / weeds streaming out behind her, and so she was given the name of Green Hair. Elle and I asked Gran why we hadn't heard this story before. Gran just smiled and said because it was an age ago, even before she herself was born, and moved to the area. The area was developed and built up, and the river was tidied up and reconstructed, and along with it, the tragic tale of Green Hair was lost to the stream of passing time. We didn't altogether believe Gran's morbid tale, but when Elle and I talked about it in bed that night, neither of us could dismiss the eerie feeling that we felt when we saw green hair flowing in the river that day.
Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.